Hello, everyone. I'm Lou Marciani, the director of the Innovation Institute for Fan Experience. You are part of a worldwide audience for our town hall today to discuss a major industry issue. What's going on with fan behavior? What are the challenges and solutions? The fan experience used to be about the game, if you remember, the concert, the marathon, or the festival. I was thinking back on my own experiences, enjoying a day at Yankee Stadium with my father, getting some Cracker Jacks and reaching down to the bottom of the box to get that toy, and my father buying a beer with his hot dog. But the sports and entertainment industry experience has changed dramatically. More often, fan behavior steals attention from our main event through disruption, interference, or violence. We have seen a 180-degree shift from protecting the fan from post 9/11 to harm, to protect the performers now, the athletes, the employees, and orderly fans from violent fans. So what's going on? Is it the post-COVID social media platforms? High ticket pricing leading to entitlement attitude? Is Facebook really to blame? Our goal today is to do a deep dive into fan behavior. The challenge for us is to produce a quality fan experience. If we're going to increase revenues, enhance attendance, and have a safe and secure event, a quality fan experience is paramount. My challenge to you is, how do we produce a great experience and manage this fan behavior? So let's get started. I want to thank the members of the expert panel here we have. Thank you for attending, and thank our sponsor. Now I'd like to introduce Mark McCourt, who will serve as our moderator today. He is the author of Snow Day, Lessons in Leadership and Resilience from Crisis and Mass Casualty Events, and is a IIFX advisor. He will moderate our virtual town hall today. Marcus, turn it over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Lou, and thank you for joining this important IIFX town hall today. As Dr. Lou shared, the fan experience is paramount to a successful event and its business outcome. A good experience can bring increased revenue and inspire fans to return. But fan behavior from inappropriate to illegal is disrupting the fan experience and negatively impacting revenue and business operations. To tackle these issues, we'll be posing your earlier submitted questions to our panelists, our Blue Ribbon panelist members, and the leaders in this industry, and we'll be getting their insightful and helpful advice. Allow me to take a moment to introduce them. Lou Barani, who is a global terrorism risk consultant with AIG. Mario Coutinho, the president of the Stadium Managers Association, the vice president of stadium operations and security for the Toronto Blue Jays, and an IIFX distinguished fellow. Vince DiGennaro, the Director of Strategic Accounts for Best Garda. Tim Frederick, a police sergeant with the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department Events Planning Section. Professor Chris Kemp, the CEO of Mind Over Matter Consultancy and an IIFX advisor. Sean Patterson, the Assistant Chief of Police at the University of Texas. Sean West, the Head of Team and Arena Security for the National Basketball Association. Eileen Williams, the Safety Officer for Tottenham Hotspur Stadium in the UK and an IIFX Distinguished Fellow. Allow me to share the structure for today's town hall. First, our questions are derived from more than 70 questions submitted to us by those who registered for this event. Second, we're going to dive into the challenging and troubling fan behavior being observed globally, from school games to the highest levels of professional sports. To break down the problems and solutions, we have separated today's agenda into two sections. First section, we'll discuss what is causing fan behavior from the unacceptable to the illegal that is overwhelming current security and safety programs. And we'll follow that session with which technologies are leaders turning to better predict, prevent, and respond to incidents. I look forward to guiding today's discussion as your moderator. And now I'd like to introduce you to Aaron Benor. this SVP of Sales for our sponsor, Respondology. Respondology is a leader in the fight against hate speech and toxicity on social media, especially in the sports industry. They currently work with the NHL, NASCAR, and teams in the NFL, NBA, and Premier League. Respondology has a very innovative platform that removes harmful comments in seconds. Aaron is going to tell us more and show us how this amazing platform works. Aaron?
Hi, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are. Thank you, Mark, for the intro. So my name is Aaron Benoit. I'm based in New York, head of sales for Respondology, and we have a tool called the Mod, which moderates and removes inappropriate comments on social media. Inappropriate means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. In sports, it can range from racism to homophobia. It can be spam and bots. It can be ad hominem attacks, and just other generally inappropriate behavior as exhibited with comments on social media. I'm going to show you how this works today. So I'm going to ask my colleague Kim to make a few comments on our test account on Instagram so I can show you how our tool removes these comments in real time. So I'm going to share my screen while Kim pulls up Instagram, if you don't mind, please. And this is our demo account on Instagram, the Troll Whacker. And I'm going to ask Kim to make two specific comments for me. Pardon my language, I'm going to keep it PG-13. But Kim, if you wouldn't mind, can you please post two separate comments? First, please post the word shit, pardon my language. And separately, please post the word spam. Let me know when you have those up there. I'm going to try to refresh the page to capture them in time.
Okay, there's the
Wonderful. Okay.
one.
I got your first one. And I'm going to see your second one come to my phone. So let me know when you have it. And I see it now. Great. So, like I said, our tool, the Mod, really does one thing and one thing only, and that is removing inappropriate comments on social media. As Mark mentioned before, we do this for a variety of teams, leagues, athletes, and sponsors in the sports world. We also work in the consumer brand world. I'm not going to bore you with that side of our business. But I'm going to refresh the page here, and you're going to see two things happen. Kim's second comment, the word spam, is going to show up because it hadn't loaded in prior. But more importantly, her curse word is going to disappear. Let's see that happen in real time as I refresh. Just like that, her curse word is now gone. Let me take you all to the back end of the Mod so I can show you what happened and why. Here's our settings, preferences, and reportings tool. And if you follow my mouse, here we see Kim's curse word comment. On Instagram, organic, as opposed to, say, Facebook paid or YouTube or Twitter, coming in a few months, TikTok. Her comment was hidden automatically because it's severe swearing at this timestamp. Our company is based in Colorado. So this is based on our customizable keyword lists that all of the teams, athletes, and sponsors and stadiums that we work with get to customize based on the types of comments they want and don't want in social media. So for example, I tell most of our partners to turn off mild swearing. All of the sports teams and leagues that we work with are pretty much okay with most of these words. As you'll see, things like crap and damn really aren't that bad for the likes of the Detroit Pistons or the Miami Dolphins. But we work with some kid influencers and international banks who have a much higher level of sensitivity. The takeaway is this really is customizable based on the types of comments one of our partners wants and doesn't want appearing on their social. So of course, we've loaded in thousands and thousands of keywords around racism and homophobic slurs. And as any brand or sports team can do, they can add in their own custom words, phrases, or emojis to hide. Let's say a silly example, but you want nothing to do with Nike sneakers. Now, any comment with the word Nike would be hidden within half a second. This is a couple of the features I like to call out, as you can hide a user permanently after X number of hidden comments. Think of it as 3 strikes, you're out rule. All of our professional sports partners love this feature here to hide any comment containing links to get rid of not only the spam and the porn bots, but especially the illegal TV streaming links that plagues a lot of our partners when it comes to their social media to protect that TV revenue. So that's the keyword filter that we offer. It really takes 300 milliseconds to do one of two things. If one of those negative keywords is present, that comment is hidden immediately. In the case of her spam post, there is no obvious negative keyword. So then that comment gets escalated to our second level of defense, which is human moderation. So we have between 1,000 and 1,500 US-based native English-speaking humans moderating on behalf of our partners 24/7, 365. I'm going to switch gears and become one of those moderators. I know it's tough to see on my phone here because it's going to make my face disappear, but this is Kim's comment in our proprietary moderation app. And I know it's really tough to see, but I got a thumbs up and a thumbs down. I'm going to put the thumbs down to reject her comments because it's clearly spam. And let me refresh the page here. Just like that, her second comment is now hidden. That's important for things like nuance, sarcasm, irony, double entendres. Think of our 1,000 moderators not only as an extension of your team's social media team, but really as a safety net to catch any inappropriate comment that gets past our keyword filter. So one of the most important things I want to call out in this day and age of social media, where the anonymity of social really, unfortunately, allows people to feel like they can act worse than they would in public, is the racism, the homophobia being yelled out. But if we were to delete these comments, the bad apple would realize fairly quickly their comment is gone. They're going to sign up for 30 fake accounts and pour gasoline on the fire. At Respondology, we exclusively hide comments for our partners, which has the advantage of discretion. If Kim is going to take a look at her phone, she's still going to see her 2 comments. More importantly, she doesn't know that the rest of the world can't see her comments. I can refresh this page all day long, and her comments, both her curse word and her spam comment, are completely gone. So that discretion is really paramount here because it doesn't even de-escalate a situation. It really prevents one from arising in the first place. So really, that's the mod in a nutshell. It has all the reporting bells and whistles one could ask for your date range picker to seeing all the comments that were hidden, all the comments that were hidden by the keyword filter by our humans. You could drop down over here and see a list of all the, I move everyone's beautiful faces. You could go straight to a list of all the racist comments that were hidden, all the spam comments that were hidden, etc. Really, the goal here is to give our sports partners control back to their social. A lot of the NFL teams that we work with have been plagued by bots, spam, and really porn bots lately, to the point where social media, which is the main way their fans can interact together, becomes unusable. So with our tool, the mod, those inappropriate comments are hidden immediately within half of a second. So then the fans can properly engage in a normal, peaceful dynamic. So really, that's the mod in a nutshell. I hope you guys enjoyed seeing what we have to offer. I'm going to put my email in the chat function here for the Zoom. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out. My email is aaron@respondology.com, but I'll throw it in there. And I look forward to hearing from you guys soon. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Aaron, and thanks to Respondology for sponsoring today's event. Very useful and helpful solution for sure. And we'll talk about more solutions later, and this is a great one to kick off with, so thank you. So let's begin. And to begin this conversation today, we felt we really needed a benchmark on where we are and what has changed. We need to ask the question, are we making the same mistakes that others made in the 1980s at places like Hasel, Hillsborough, or Roskilde? We've asked Professor Chris Kemp to share his thoughts on what is different today about the challenges the sports and entertainment business is facing. Chris?
Thanks, Mark. Hi, everybody. Great to see so many people online. I'm just going to set the scene for today's session. For humans, learning from our mistakes is really difficult to deal with. Researchers at MIT have shown for the first time that the brain learns more after a success than from a failure. It's a reward rather than its absence that drives learning. When an incident takes place at an event, causing either serious injury or loss of life, we tend to focus on the proximate causes of the incident rather than the distal elements leading up to it. Whilst carrying out our investigations, we often provided with challenges which are to society, which can include the questioning of our known norms and values, things we do every day that need to change. This makes us rethink the manner in which society works and to reorganize our way of working to institute changes at events. The aspects of the physical and the psychosocial, which make up crowd dynamics, are key factors that we must focus on. Change is our biggest enemy, and it is the element that most people find so difficult to accept, because in reality, it's something that must become a constant. If we take Hillsborough as an example, there were 2 early warning elements at soccer games in the same stadium before the ill-fated FA Cup semi-final on the 15th of April 1989. Here, 97 supporters died, mostly crushed to death, and 766 were injured. It was foreseeable because near misses had been spotted before and nothing had been done about them, and no one heeded the warnings. At Roskilde in Denmark on the 30th of June 2000, in simplistic terms, the direction of the wind blowing the sound away from the stage caused fans to move forward, and thus a crushing incident occurred where 9 people died. The district attorney in Roskilde 2002 stated that it took too long a time from when they acknowledged the severity of the incident until the music was stopped. In his opinion, this is related to the lack of clear procedures as to who does what. This was deemed as an accident as it was perceived not to be foreseeable. But there are 3 major elements which mean that we have short memories when it comes to incidents and events. The first is that both the FA Cup final, which spawned the Taylor Report, and the Roskilde Festival, which created a safety alliance in the Europe Event Safety Group, many of those attending these 2 sad occasions are now either dead, no longer go to soccer matches or festivals, or were too traumatized to return. This means that the memories of those collectively attending now are markedly different from those who attended then. In reality, the further we become removed from what happens, the less likely we are to recognize the importance of constantly changing what we do. Every year when I work at the British Grand Prix, the site manager has changed the safety and crowd management plan to fit new thinking and elements pointed out the year before. She constantly seeks out mitigation of the risk. At the Roundhouse in London, ingress and egress is regularly reviewed for safest and securest options. At Wembley Stadium, constant exercising and testing of plans take place, and even then, things can go wrong. To make this work and to make the way that we view behaviors, we must go back to basics. We need to reimagine the time, space, movement, and perception elements. If we do not do this, we will always be behind the curve. COVID has given us time to make changes and integrate these into our 4 core event cornerstones of planning, communication, management, and interoperability. But I wonder just how many of us took time out to look at these during the pandemic and make changes to our events to ensure that we are now up to date on our thinking. Many companies are approaching me now, focused on the future-proofing of their organizations, mitigating risk, and ensuring a sustainable and resilient future for their venues, events, and wider businesses. This is because since being released from COVID restrictions, the fan base has changed. It feels that it is entitled and has become more demanding to manage. This means that change is happening and people are becoming braver in what they are asking. But this is not easy for all organizations, as change can be such a difficult concept. So the question today is, how do we deal with this change in behavior? Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. And that's a wonderful and deep opening for the conversation today. And one thing that opening tells us is this is serious business and it does need attention immediately. So we can get back to the business of hosting proper events successfully. So let's get to these questions and let's get to our panelists for their answers today. Our first question to begin comes from Kyle Mockler. And Kyle asks, how is the average fan behaving in 2021 versus the average fan in 2010? And what problems is this changed behavior creating for security teams? Let's kick this off with Sean Patterson in Tennessee. Sean?
Hey, Mark, how's it going? Just wanted to correct the record. I actually worked for the University of Tennessee, the real UT, not Texas. No offense to all my Texas friends out there. I think what we're seeing is we're seeing a reflection of the national, the view or the national tone on police relations. and it's in our stadiums. People don't feel that they're going to be held accountable for their actions, quite frankly. And I think technology is making it easier for those sentiments to be spread throughout the country and the world. For instance, there are chants going around. I won't go into detail what those chants are. I think we've all heard them and seen them, but they're going around from sporting event to sporting event, reflecting the leadership of the country. And, in 2010, we didn't have that technology. So you couldn't see what was going on in a different stadium unless the news had showed it to you. But now our fans are they're bringing the camera and they're making their own news at all the events they go to. So they can film it, they can put it out on their social media and then blast it out. And now everyone sees it that's attending other events. And they quite frankly show up and they think, well, all right, that'll be something, cool that we can do. But again, I think at the core of the issue is that they just don't think they're going to be held accountable for their actions.
Thank you. Eileen, let me ask you, coming from the other side here of the pond, as they say in the UK, what is happening? What have you seen change from your view? You're muted, Eileen.
Thank you. So football is in terms of the UK has always been known as the most violent supporter groups. We've had risk management coming in from the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, and I think since we've come back post-COVID, what we're seeing is, as referred to, supporters feel that entitlement and they're feeling a little bit braver. So where we were dealing with potentially one person who was behaving inappropriately, we now find his 6 friends or people on the periphery of that incident now wanting to have a voice and have a comment and some sort of opinion on it, and are more likely now to join in to protect that person than say, in some instances, you need to deal with this guy or this woman because their behaviors are not good. So we have definitely seen an increase of the people on the periphery of risk management and social behaviour now becoming more vocal and potentially getting drawn into things more easily. In terms of policing, we also work very close with the police forces here across the UK, and our league is a national league in England. And again, police would say that the types of behaviour they're seeing are slightly varied from previous. And the arrests are up, but it's possibly more drugs-related arrests now, which we didn't have 10 years ago. So there may also be some other factors that are coming into play just by society and the nature of what's available to people on event days and their access to drugs and alcohol, for example. Incidentally, here in the UK, soccer is the only sport where you're not allowed to drink alcohol in view of the sport. Any other sport, you are allowed to drink alcohol in the view of play. And that in itself, within the stadium management, does give us some opportunity to modify some behaviours, because we can, we don't see that coming into, there's a limited time when they can drink. And, we've also hosted NFL in our stadium, had hosted 4 NFL events. So we've been able to draw a good comparison to supporter behaviour across NFL fans in the UK against the soccer fans. And whilst they haven't had the arrests, but certainly the alcohol and the length of tenure of the event and the whole guest experience here allows them to drink for much longer in view of the pitch. And so that takes a little bit of different management. And we've seen it even from 2019 to 21, we've probably seen a little bit of behaviour slipping just in those 2 years.
Thank you. Mick McConnell asks us, why is this happening now? Are there insights into the problems fans are creating at sporting and entertainment settings? Perhaps it's post-COVID, perhaps it's other things, as Eileen mentions, drug use and so on. But why is it all of a sudden happening now? Sean West, you're seeing this with NBA events. Share with us your thoughts.
Thanks, Mark, and it certainly is a pleasure to be with you all today. From the NBA's perspective, we're seeing, sort of an amalgamation of a bunch of different things. Pandemic fatigue, national sentiment and politicization of health and safety protocols, on to, after being on proverbial lockdown for the last year and a half, almost 2 years, we are seeing sort of a slightly demographic shift of our fan base. Our normal, years ago, our normal season ticket holders aren't as readily, forward in coming back to our buildings. And so we're seeing, a lot of younger fans, a lot of, casual fans who would normally not attend some of our games, attend on a third party ticket purchase from a season ticket holder or what have you. And then it's becoming a point to where we have to sort of recalibrate, refocus, and our arena security directors across our league are doing a fantastic job in reshaping the behavior in our arena decorum and how you behave in our environment. We're one of the few sports in the entire world where our fans are right up the action, right? With feet on the floor, within arm's reach of our players. And so, fan conduct has always been at the top of our list of priorities. And what we try to do now, and what we're trying to do, and what we're working hard to do, is stress the zero tolerance of it, right? And I think the chief mentioned, the national sentiment related to authority and law enforcement, and all that can be sort of mixed into what we're seeing now. And then, you bring in the overlay of alcohol consumption and people having this sort of courage to act out and do things that they wouldn't normally do. And it's just, again, a mix of all these different factors that we're really trying to pinpoint, and the data shows us that, right? So at last, we've been through, one of the first leagues to shut down in 2020 due to COVID, the NBA bubble in Orlando. We started up the 2020-21 season in December, and now we're here again at 21-22 season. So 3 NBA seasons in 1 calendar year, and all of our fans coming back into the buildings, and then we're asking them to do more, right? So the closer they are to the floor, they have to test, to be vaccinated, they have to wear masks. And so all these things, as a part of their experience, is new to them. So it's gonna take some time to get them used to our current environment, and we have to be, more collaborative with our ticketing groups and our leadership from, fan and guest experience to be creative in how we make it more pleasurable for the fans, but at the same time address the behavior and really tap down on the behavior.
And you touch on, and Mario, I want to ask you about this with in Canada. It's tough when the customer is the one causing the problem. That's right. It's a different animal. Go ahead, Mario. What are you seeing change in the and why now? Why is it happening now all of a sudden from your perspective?
I'm not sure there's a one specific answer to that question. I think part of it is definitely COVID has paused how people behaved and what they were normally used to doing, and being in a position to get back out into the community and to do the things that they've done is slightly different. I think people are still somewhat hesitant about COVID in their specific region, and if you talk to anyone else in different counties or states, it's really regional. But I think what's happening here is the underlying message that we have in venues is staffing. I think we succeed when we're at full complements and we have trained and hired the right people to manage our expectations. But what COVID has done is unfortunately created a shortage of part-time staff to meet those needs. And we've lost a lot of veterans who are used to that fan behavior and balancing security and fan experience. And so I think we're faced with a new workforce that has to adapt to this new environment. And unfortunately, the average fan now is far more demanding. And they're quick to, as someone mentioned earlier, start filming any interaction. If it's negative, they're quick to post it, whether it's truthful or not. And I think that's a disadvantage to us. The inexperienced employee who is new to this industry and finding a fan confrontation doesn't really entice them to want to come back and do it again. So I think what we have to work on is understanding the training, the recruitment, reinvesting in our frontline staff, and giving them the tools they need to ensure that fan experience remains positive, not only for our fans, but also our staff to come back again and work the next shift. So staffing has been part of that problem that we're dealing with, but I think it's a matter of revisiting how we manage events that will help us get through this.
Thank you. And the next question, which I think it kind of leads to is, what are the fans doing? What the heck are they doing is sort of the idea here. And then, but what is it they want? What are they craving in terms of service and amenities in this post-COVID world or politicized world or whatever the issues are? they don't feel that they're getting, that they need to act out. Is it a lack of service? Is it a lack of enough people watching over them? What's leading to inappropriate and violent behavior among the fans, that they're trying to grab onto something? And I'm Sean West, I'm gonna go back to you because I know you're studying and watching this. What's the sense of what these fans are trying to get through this behavior?
I think they want to go, and that's a great question, Mark. I think they want to go back to a pre-COVID world right away, right? They don't want to be bothered with some of the health and safety protocols that we've established in some of our arenas in terms of vaccination and testing and face mask wearing. And something else that Mario just touched on about staffing and training, right? Unfortunately, the workforce has changed, and it has been a hindrance in some of our operations. And the workforce that's in place now aren't necessarily our veterans who are well equipped to handle situations where fans are disruptive in the de-escalation tactics or the escalation tactics that we normally employ. So I think their overall experience, again, one of the things we instituted back in 2020 was that our arenas are allowed to either allow or not allow bags into the arena, right? And so as a part of that process, if you allow bags, you have to send them through X-ray machines now. And I'm getting into the weeds of the technology here, but again, their experience has changed. And so what they want to do is what we're sort of seeing, is that they want to go back to a pre-pandemic world. And unfortunately, it was the same thing with 9/11. We can't go back to a pre-9/11 world. We have to deal with reality. And so I think that's what we're trying to sort of really research, establish, and sort of combat on our end.
Thank you. Tim Frederick, you're front line with the Las Vegas Metropolitan PD at these events, and you're supporting the workers, you're supporting the security teams as the backup. Tell us, what are you seeing in terms of what are fans craving and seeking in your experience, in your engagements?
Absolutely, sir. And I'd like to just echo what Sean and Mario said about staffing. We have our own staffing challenges with officers working. There's so much demand and limited supply of officers working multiple shifts.
Tim, unfortunately, your service is not working well, and we cannot really hear you. So we're going to move on. Bring up a question submitted by Ken Kubler, and ask Sean Patterson to share this with us, experience he had with us. Ken asked, fans are increasingly rushing playing areas, courts and fields, often after a win to celebrate, sometimes during the events. And the question is, how can we control this prohibited behavior? And Sean, you had a personal experience and a leadership decision around this recently. And if you share that short story with us, I think it'd be very helpful to our audience today. Thank you.
Sure, I think it's a great question because it's happening more and more. As some of you may or may not know, our university has a storied history with the current coach of Ole Miss. He was coming back to town, and we were going to play that team. And before I go into what we did before and that evening, I would be remiss if I didn't mention two things. Number one, what you saw on display that night represents a very, very small amount of our fan base. We have very passionate, energetic fans that come to our games, do a great job, and go home and really enjoy the event. And the other thing that was kind of overshadowed was there were so many things that we did right to get 102,455 people. It was a sellout crowd in on an evening game and then out safely. So those two things have to be mentioned. But knowing that there could be some issues with the visiting coach coming in, we have a very robust network for football preparations. We start the week leading up to it, and we have multiple meetings with our athletics folks and the security contractor that is contracted to provide the actual security. So we were preparing for a field rush, and people far smarter than I years ago realized that you don't stop a field rush on the field. That's too late. So what you have to do is you actually have to get up and get into those student sections and for lack of a better term, basically flood the student section with a show of force, with security personnel. And that's what we planned on doing. We planned on putting our security contractors personnel 3 per aisle in the student section, because if they can't get to the aisles to then go down and flood onto the field, they won't do it at all. That was the first thing. And then we also reached out to our coaching staff, and we asked them to tell the team that if we win, go to the fans, go to the student section. And we were prepared to let the students know that, hey, sit tight, they're coming to you, because that's really what they want. They want to be part of that celebration. So why hold it from them? Bring the team to them. So as that game progressed, in the beginning of it, it was pretty good, and then it came a point around halftime where it didn't seem likely that we would win. So much of our radar kind of dropped on the field rush plan, but we still had a meeting in our command post with all the partners involved, and kind of said, you know what, everybody knew what their role was, everybody knew what their assignment was going to be if we had it. And late in the third quarter, it actually started to turn to the point that I went down onto the field and into by the student section, and at one point we realized, oh my goodness, we could pull this one off. So we enacted the plan. We put everybody where we wanted to put them, and then we actually had a controversial call not go our way within the closing minutes of the game, and at that point, what we never expected would happen started to happen, and they basically started to throw items onto the field. Some of those were empty beer cans, some of them were half full beer cans, some of them were full beer cans. Some of them were water bottles or Gatorade bottles with the caps on. If you get hit in the head with a water bottle, a Gatorade bottle from 150 feet in the air, you're gonna probably go to the hospital. So it was very concerning. We actually have at that point, our command staff was stationed pretty smartly, in my opinion. Our incident commander, our chief, was up in the command post. One of my deputy chiefs was kind of running everything in the command post. My other deputy chief was in the emergency operations center, kind of taking that holistic view of the remainder of campus. And then I was down on the field. The fans continued to throw things. Play was suspended. Our first concern was the safety of the teams and also the safety of all the first responders and security personnel working. And we kind of didn't know what was going to happen. We didn't know if they were going to suspend the game indefinitely, if they were just going to take a pause. It actually hit a point where the safety of everyone that was complying with everything was coming into play. So I had made the call that we were just going to evacuate and we were going to empty the student section and send them out. And that's what we did. We put our staff members up into the stands. We basically we said that's enough is enough. We started pushing them towards the portals. Communication was really great on all fronts that night. The one in hindsight, the one area it could have been better is we could have communicated with the officials just a little bit better, because we had actually gotten the fans, most of the student section fans, which is really the root of where all that stuff was coming from. We had gotten them up to the portals. Most of them were just about out of the portals, and then the officials decided to resume play. So if anyone had seen video that night, it almost looked like a scene out of 300 where they all came running back down the stands. And at that point, gameplay resumed. Once the game resumed, there was really nothing else that was thrown after that. But in the weeks following that, we had some meetings with athletics, and we developed, much like Professor Kemp was saying, we evaluated what we did. We did a lot of really good things. And then we said, what can we do better? And we have come up with things from that actually made the 3 subsequent games in the remainder of the season that much safer, that much more enjoyable for the fan to come and enjoy the game.
Thank you. It's interesting. And I think it goes to that, managing what the fans want, giving what they want, but also managing them well. So thank you. George Cunningham asks, how does one assess the current environment surrounding an event and use the findings to operationally plan for your event? I think it's a great follow-up to the story Sean just shared. Lou Barani, you're expert in this. Share with us your thoughts and answer that question, please.
Okay, Mark, thanks, and thanks for having me. I think one of the biggest challenges we all face as security professionals is time management. That's a resource that's usually stretched pretty thin, but you still have to plan for every event. And venues that have a hockey game, a basketball game, and a concert, one right after the other, it gets a little difficult. That being said, you can't assess in a single event vacuum. You have to consider prior events. You have to consider lessons learned. You have to use available tools like law enforcement intel, social media, event-focused intelligence, and data. And a good thing to look at is the specific entertainment's prior history. What has happened in the past that may raise a flag that you have to take a hard look at to mitigate. Hopefully there's an industry clearinghouse for best practices. There are definitely government resources, law enforcement, think tanks, industry organizations like IIFX, universities, your contacts, and networking resources. Now, this type of preparation is a big lift when you're first starting out, but as time and events progress, you'll have a significant dossier of historical data to plan future events. So it's kind of like a building block exercise where you take every lesson learned and put it in your Rolodex and have it there for future referral.
Thank you. I want to ask the same question to Vince DiGennaro. Vince, what are your thoughts on that?
Mark, thanks, and thanks for having me. I think a really important piece of this, in my opinion, is not just creating a very safe environment, which I think everybody on this call, whether you're a panelist or an attendee or whatever happens to be, knows how to do that. We're industry professionals and that's what we do, but it's creating the perception of a safe environment. And I think that that's probably the more challenging task that all of us have at hand, is that it's not just about what we know is creating something that's good. It's about what actually people believe is safe. And that goes from an anti-terrorism standpoint, that goes from a security standpoint, that goes from a health and safety standpoint. And all of us have had to become kind of experts in different regards to all of those different levels over the past 2 years. And I think it's really telling and interesting, some of the adjustments that Sean had just mentioned in terms of how they took information from one event and rolled it into a couple other football games. How Sean West from the NBA had talked about them making league-wide adjustments to policies and implementing new technologies to make the environment safer and more secure. But I think what Mario said, and it kind of hits home for me a little bit more, but more than anything else, this is about creating a safe environment with the resources that we have available. And those resources, more than ever today, are more limited than we've ever seen. And it's, I think, the unique partnership of evaluating what we know we need to do against, the personnel resources and the technology resources that are at our disposal. And I know that we're going to cover a lot more of that technology stuff later on today, but I think that's really the critical aspect of things here is how do you shape a plan with what you have available, and how do you do that against those industry best practices, as Lou had mentioned.
Great, thank you. I'm going to stick with fan experience, jump around a little bit here. Two people, Paige Herbert and Margie McCullough, asked this question. I want to ask you, Jim Mercurio, with your experience at Levi Stadium, how do you feel the pandemic has altered the fan experience response during entertainment events? And you've been hosting a number of events during this at Levi Stadium. What's your experience and observations been in that time?
I think, first of all, the pandemic has caused people to be, well, frankly, confused, right? There's really no standard across at least the United States. I think in the UK, they've got a little bit more of a global standard in some cases, but we can't seem to get, every venue has different rules and regulations, every county, every city, every state. So it's confusing to a lot of our customers, I think, for one. Two, I think it's caused a number of people and their anxiety levels, to be candid, as they're standing in line, as the amount of time they're standing in line next to somebody they don't know. They've been cooped up for 18 months and in some cases don't remember or don't want to remember how to behave. And I think, there's a level of politics, sadly, that has gotten involved into this whole thing. So the pandemic has not been kind, I think, in terms of our customers and to our fans on what it is that we as venue operators need to remind people what those rules and regulations are and what we expect from them. I think the change and Sean kind of talked a little bit about, the changing of fan base. I think at a society level, if you look at the baby boomer generation as well, there's some changes that are naturally taking place there, right? And you've got, whether that's your customers or even your workforce. So the pandemic itself has just not been kind. I guess I would say. And I think more and more, we are having to take on the responsibility of educating, in some cases, raising our children, raising our customers, raising our fans of what it is that it's acceptable and what's not. And quite frankly, people today almost idolize behavior that is inappropriate. I mean, back in the day, yeah, there'd be fights. I mean, I've been at this for over 30 years, and you'd have fights because people, stepped on a guy's foot or drank too much or did something said something that he or she didn't like. Today, the first thing somebody says that they pull out their phone and they want to record it. They want to get a bunch of likes from it. So there's a society change of behavior, how people respond and react. And I think it's incumbent upon us to kind of re-educate, teach, and instill the things that mom and dad kind of taught a lot of us on this call years ago that seemingly is just not a priority anymore.
Thank you. And I think we have reached the end of this first session. I think we've got panelists. Thank you, done an amazing job, and the questions are great on what is causing the problem and how are we dealing with that problem and understanding it so we can put pieces in place. And I think it was an outstanding dynamic review of the questions on the minds of our audience. So thank you. And we'll go right in. I want to jump into our next session, split our time fairly and get into some of the technology solutions that we've been looking at and dealing with. So I'm going to kick it right back off with a question from Deirdre Gordon. In light of the possibility of an active attack or mass casualty events at these arenas and sporting events, what current technology platforms such as CCTV, metal detection, gun detection are being used successfully? And I'll start back with you, Lou Barani, on that.
Sure. I think you need multiple layers of mutually supporting procedures and technology to cover vulnerabilities and gaps that you've observed in your environment. Megapixel cameras matched with skilled surveillance operators so they can see what's going on and any disruptive behavior. There's also behavior pattern recognition with artificial intelligence and shot detectors. Obviously, the screening procedures and technology like metal detectors supported by wands and watchful operators. There has to be a mix between the technology and the personnel. All these need to be calibrated and maintained. Most importantly, no matter what technology you have, you must have the policy and procedures to leverage that technological capability. One good thing is auto discovery for stadium Wi-Fi, so you can connect to every phone in case there's an emergency, so you can direct people where to go. Everybody just about has a phone. You can share that information immediately. You should also have the trained manpower to enforce those policies and procedures. Achieve situational awareness of your security environment, and then when things go bad, have an ability to maintain a common operating picture for what's going on, and the way to communicate response protocols to first responders and to the fans that you need to evacuate. You basically have to determine what works for you and what has worked in facilities like yours. Good ideas and best practices should be sought out and should be shared.
Yeah, that's what we're doing today, right?
Yeah.
So thank you for that. Vince DeGennaro, same question for you.
Thanks, Mark. Yeah, I think it's a really interesting question for me personally, because I think a lot of what I go back to is the screening technology and what we utilize in order to efficiently screen the individuals coming into our venues. On that particular front, again, kind of going back to what we were just talking about, the pairing of personnel and technology, we found that there are certain technologies that we've been able to employ at venues across the country that actually reduce the amount of manpower that's required to appropriately screen all the guests to our venues. For example, there's a college in central Pennsylvania that we service that we were able to reduce the number of entry lanes from 212 to 36 based off of increased technology, which allowed us to redeploy those team members in other locations, increase guest services in certain areas and all that kind of fun stuff. So I think the way that you look at things is how can you leverage technology to your benefit? And Lou talked about kind of that layered approach. And that's exactly what you need, not just on the gates, but everywhere within your venue. I think that the move to digital ticketing has been a phenomenal move on our end to reduce fraud, as well as to increase, the fan experience when it comes to that kind of particular things. But it has led to increased challenges and the need for increased staffing and education and communication and all that kind of stuff. So I really think that systematic implementation of strategic technologies, both on the safety and security side, the health and safety side, as well as the guest experience side, will continue to be pivotal as we move forward. But doing that in a way where you can appropriately communicate what those changes are, not only to your guests, but to your team members, and understanding, as Mario pointed out before, that a lot of times you're dealing with a lot of new team members that are coming in your venues that have never worked there before or don't understand the new technologies and need to be educated on those ends. I think it leads to new challenges that present themselves that we never anticipated before, but ones that I would much rather be dealing with having to work through educating new team members than significantly long lines at the gates of my venues.
Understood. With all technology transfer comes the training for sure, and that's a big step, especially in high turnover areas. Lisa, the next question, getting to some of the technology, especially biometrics, as we try to understand audience size and behavior. Doug O'Gordon asks, what are some examples of how AI and behavioral biometrics are being used at stadiums and entertainment venues to address fan behavior? And Jim, I'll go back to you on what you're doing in your role.
Yeah, some of the things that we looked at, and it's had some unbelievable impacts, not only from fan behavior, but also from employees. Body cameras, for example, it seemed to provide some anxiety for employees. Nobody wanted to wear them early on. But what it does is it serves as in most cases, an opportunity to diffuse a situation when you're coming on scene on an incident, not just for police officers. I use it for guest services personnel, ushers. We use it at ticket takers and things of that nature, right? So what it's also done is it's served as a check on employees on how they're actually behaving, how they're coming into a situation, what language they're using. And so I found that it was pretty telling when I said, who is this security guard that is talking? I don't recognize this person. The usage, the properness of how this person was talking on camera versus how they might not talk on camera. So it raised the level of customer service, candidly, with people that are using body cameras, but it also diffused, in most cases, people's behavior when they realize, hey, listen, you're on camera, your behavior is inappropriate. It tends to bring people down a few notches. There's always one or two that want to perform for the camera, and they find their way to the jail cell a little faster than the next guy or gal does. But so that's one thing that we've used. But there's a bunch of other technology, text line, social media people are using. Video analytics, so that you can kind of identify, maybe predictive analytics that kind of certainly help with crowd movement and things of that nature. But I think for us, what we're finding is it's not always just about technology. There really has to be a balance in between the technology you deploy, why you're using the technology, and what you're looking to try to accomplish from that technology. And don't just assume that technology is going to solve for all of your issues. It's really got to be one more tool in the tool shed, is how I like to talk about it. So I guess my advice to everybody out there that's listening would be, don't put all your eggs in one basket and think facial recognition, for example, is going to solve all your issues. It doesn't, and body cameras isn't going to solve all your issues, but it does help solve, and so will technology, some of the issues that are at hand, I think.
Thank you. Sean, similarly, what are you seeing from trying technologies to solve for this in the NBA?
Yeah, and I wholeheartedly agree with Jim on this front. That it's just not technologies; it's just are just tools that we utilize. For example, we require all of our buildings to have a text message program to allow the fans to communicate directly with arena security to report bad behavior, and basically having the fans feel invested in their own experience, in their own sort of atmosphere. if they see bad behavior or if they're having a bad experience with another fan, they can do so using that technology. The other piece is that we have a 24-hour, 7-day-a-week global security operations center that utilizes, software and vendors that, track language. For example, if we have someone threatening to run on the court or do something of that nature, that language and those algorithms pick up on that language, and we're able to identify that person based on where they're sitting in the arena, based on video analytics, where it's coming from. And then when incidents happen and we aren't able to get a positive ID on an individual, tracking their movements throughout the arena through video analytics, all the way back to their seat, and then their digital footprint, as Vince mentioned, the digital ticketing piece has really helped us to really track down people, who they are, who sold them the ticket, when did they buy it, season ticket holder or not, all those types of things. And then it leads over into if they've done something egregious enough that warrants an arena ban, and then a league-wide ban helps us to track that person down. And then we're also still leaning and researching on the facial recognition piece. I know there are a lot of challenges in different markets about how it's applied in some of these venues. But when we ban an individual, not only from the arena side, but the league side as well, is enforcing that is going to be hard to track, right, without a certain technology. So it's a very critical piece of it, but only tools to help us do our job better and making sure that we have the proper trained and experienced staff to deploy these tools.
So sharing information sounds like speeding investigation, getting results quicker and safer. One of the new technologies that we didn't know about 3 years ago is COVID-19 testing. That's a new technology that's come all of our ways to the detriment of our noses. Chantel Leclerc asks, how can you use COVID testing as part of your strategy for fan safety? So certainly with this especially springing up, Eileen, you mentioned some new protocols coming now in the UK. Let's ask you about that.
So it's one more thing that goes alongside of all of the other behaviours we're actually talking about. And as of today in the UK, we have our new restrictions coming in called Plan B, government restrictions, which require everybody coming to the stadium either to have a COVID vaccination pass to show their status of double vaccination, or a lateral flow test negative. And it's very restrictive in what we can do. And more importantly, we are now tasked with refusing entry to people who don't meet that criterion. So what we've been doing here at the stadium since August, since the start of our football season, we have been running the COVID checks as a matter of course. So we've been able to educate people that this potentially may have come. But now, come Sunday, we'll be tasked with refusing entry to people. It'll be approximately, our current data shows is about 2% of people have shown us no evidence that they have either been double vaccinated or that they have taken a lateral flow test. And those are the 2% that we need to refuse entry to, which will be approximately between 1,500 and 1,200 people. Now, of course, as we have talked about resources, that will not be a practical number for us to tackle. So we've had to do some targeted activations behind that, because again, anything we want to do that you're trying to modify behavior, you have to have the resources behind it to do everything. So whether you're looking to eject people from your stadium, you may be doing multiple ejections and not have the number of teams to take those people out and deal with them appropriately. We estimate on average it takes us between 20 and 27 minutes to eject one person safely, gather information from them, try and get all the data we want so that we can get the ejection leading to a sanction of a suspension of the ticket or a ban, or handing over to police for further action. So if you're taking a team of 4 people out of the situation where they're there to help. So from a COVID perspective, we're now going to be looking at that as part of our ingress. So our whole 3-hour ingress process will now be looking at rejection models, and we'll have to demonstrate that because the sanction to us, of course, will be that we're not meeting government requirements, and therefore we would be sanctioned for not introducing this. So just a quick figure, I've just been doing my sums today. When we put this in tomorrow, or sorry, on Sunday, the uplift cost is £9,000 per game.
Per game.
So there's a huge cost that's come with COVID to implement and make sure that people are coming here are safe against government guidelines. Has COVID changed people's behavior as a contribute? I would say when we've gone to asking people for COVID, we only do spot checks, 20% spot checks. So we're asking 12 to 15,000 people to show us their evidence. And that's what we've done from since August. People are very happy to do so. So I think that people are coming to the venues because they're very happy to come back and enjoy. We've tried different technologies to try and speed up that process of how we would get fans back in more quickly, and using technology. Can we use the QR code against their ticket? Again, it comes at a huge cost. But I think in the main, the COVID part of the return, they're very welcoming of all the processes that are in place. It is, of course, an extra thing they have to do. They have to get online, they have to get a pass, and they have to show it to us as well as the ticket. So it's an extra thing, but I think we've had no resistance, apart from a very small minority, 2% of what we've sampled. So I don't think that'll be a problem for us. It's just educating people to make sure they have the right evidence to come to us. But other things that affect you this week, the government announced that before you come, you have to have a lateral flow test. Guess what? No lateral flow tests available online for people to order up. So that might be another challenge that we have. I couldn't get my hands on a lateral flow test. So we'll be tasked. We'll be damned if we do, and we'll be damned if we don't. And so these are the challenges. And going back to that inexperience of workforce, the venue familiarization, constantly since we've opened back up again in August. Yeah, thanks very much for doing what you did really well last week. But guess what? Forget that. We're now doing this. So there's an element of re-educating people all the time. And we have to bear in mind these people work for us once, maybe every 2 weeks, maybe twice a week. And the retention of information, there's no continuing to repeat the practice to get a hold of it. So when we bring them in, we do quite a number of induction evenings with them so that they come and learn the venue. But the whole piece of inexperienced people, permanently ask them to do new things, forget what we taught you last week, learn something new, is a bigger challenge than, I think, for the COVID piece, educating our customers.
Thank you. It's a very complex situation to manage through and a very fluid one to manage through. I want to ask Mario, similarly, and again, coming out of Canada, what is your experience here with COVID testing and fan safety? You're muted, Mario.
Sorry about that. The one takeaway is that, traditionally, we probably don't have a very good relationship with our public health units. But if anything we've learned is that we have to really build that relationship, and they have to understand our business and how we operate before they enact any type of regulations. So we unfortunately, in Toronto exactly, went through not being able to play here, starting our games in Florida, then moving to Buffalo, and then back to Toronto. And during each of those steps, it was a different local public health set of rules that we had to adapt to, much to what Elaine said. So really, at the end of the day, right now in Ontario, only spectators who are fully vaccinated can attend. At one point, it was a proof of a negative test, which was somewhat problematic, sending someone to a local pharmacy to get a test and so forth. So at least the government was able to adapt that rule. But you also have to think about your employees. And ultimately, our police officers working our games had to be fully vaccinated as well. And our staff, we have the ability of testing those who are not. The majority of our employees also have to be tested. So trying to get a labor force to meet those requirements, and then, as Elaine was talking to, having a process to screen our spectators only complicates matters. So you have to get people in the building first before you can manage them. So you're moving resources. You're finding, whether it's volunteers or maybe employees, to help screen for those QR codes in a job and a role they're not used to. So I think logistically, it's just another one of these layers that you have to overcome. From a fan experience, now there's a delay getting in because they have to show their QR code on their device. And if it's a family of 4, then it's having to show 4 different QR codes for us to be able to use either a government app to validate that or use a manual process, which gets somewhat complicated sometimes. And depending on those interactions, you may have to pull that person out of line just to not slow down the process. So after delay in getting your QR code, then you're going through the normal traditional screening of security checkpoint, and then the digital ticket back on your phone again. So that education was a bit of a challenge. We were fortunate that we went from limited capacity from 15 to 30,000 where we ended the season. Now, if things were normal, we would be back at full capacity, but still dealing with the challenges of dealing with those COVID screenings. So I guess my message is work with public health and try to make them understand their business. And based on your footprint, try to find the most thoughtful plan in terms of managing your gates, and maybe it is adjusting your times to meet the needs.
Well, thank you very much for that. And Dr. Liu, it is hard to believe that we have gone through not all the questions. I think we scratched the surface on these topics today. That was a very quick hour and change here. Just amazing. I want to reintroduce Dr. Liu and ask him to help summarize what he just sat and heard today. I will share with our audience and our speakers. We probably got through less than half of all the questions we hoped to today, but the answers were absolutely fantastic and in depth, and I think very worthwhile. And certainly this will lead to opportunity to have another event like this and address even more questions. So I'll turn it back to you, Dr. Liu.
Well, first of all, Mark, on behalf of all of us, the audience and the panelists, we want to thank you for a great job in moderating this town hall. The first thing that comes to my mind on summarizing is I want to use the word reset. Reset. Here's an opportunity. It reminds me of 9/11. I think some of us had to reset our whole operations, our philosophies, our policies, our procedures. And so I see the same thing here taking place. And it's also very good because it's also a time, and I think I'm going back to Dr. Kemp, it's a time for creativity and growth as well. I think it's a chance for us to re-engineer how we're doing things and maybe do it better than we did before, because we took time to get off the merry-go-round and look at things. So I want to say, Chris, there's a couple of takeaways for the audience I picked up on, and this is kind of your homework for the day here from Dr. Liu here. But I think to start off with, we have to rethink the approach to the event and be thinking in terms of putting the fan first. It's a little change for folks, but if you center your management around that concept, you can't go wrong, because this is why we're doing what we're doing. So when we look at this philosophy and to provide this what I call quality experience, does potentially solve this behavior problem in a way, but it's the beginning of it. And that journey of that fan is important to us as managers of our events. So I would say looking at a takeaway is think differently a little bit. In your staff meetings, think of the fans should come up first, etc. This came up from all of you in creating that health, safety, and security event. You can't have an event without a safe and secure environment. There's no question about that. But reimagining that event and how we do things, and making sure we fight for resources and we have enough money to do the proper things, and taking, I think Lou mentioned, retaking a look at your policies and your procedures so we can mitigate risk. And I think Eileen talked heavily about the health safety. I'm not sure it's going anywhere. I don't think it's going away, in a sense that we have to make sure that we pay attention to the health safety factors involved in our fan experience. This creating, train, and consistently enforce fan code of conduct, major takeaway from this town hall. Fans are bringing their political feelings and their philosophy to the event. But here's the difference, folks. When they purchase that ticket, that triggers a new standard. When they purchase that ticket, it changes the standard. And when you look at the fan code of conduct, requires the guest to refrain from the following: behavior that is unruly, disruptive, threatening or illegal in nature, intoxication or other signs of alcohol or substance impairment that result in irresponsible behavior. I think that's the standard that I think Lou mentioned earlier, and I think Dr. Kemp. It's our standard, not that of the fan, not to be ugly about it, but when they buy that ticket, they have to abide by our standard, and that standard should be high, period. The next one was the same level. Our environment, we talk about this reset, staffing. We've lost a lot of our talent, folks. The workforce has changed. We've lost skilled workers, different generation of workers. We have to create new training systems, new curriculums. It's now virtual training. How do we measure learning? Giving the staff the tools to do the job, as Vince mentioned. We have a lot of work to do on training, folks. It's not just about technology, but it's about technology, people, and processes. And I think this is what's facing us this coming year. Train, set, and enforce standards. Along with the code of conduct, enforcing a new standard of policies, procedures are critical. We need to adjust. We need to review all of those processes and procedures we have in hand. But I think it's a good time to do it. I think it's a lot of good time to do a lot right now as we go through this post-pandemic era. We talked about smart venue to stay ahead of the fans. I think Aaron was a good example of how we can stay in front of the fans with social media monitoring. And how do we get to predictive environments where we can predict things out in front versus being reactive? I think the proactive part is really important. And that how do we get the right data and the right intelligence to make those decisions? We talked about situational awareness today and making that decision. So data is going to be very important to us, more so than ever, to make that right decision. And de-escalation of the environment, training people, using social media, like Aaron said, to de-escalate that environment. So we have a lot of work to do. I hate to say this, but the fan behavior can be managed, but it starts off with, one, looking at fans as your center of your strategy for growth, creating that fan experience so it's positive, so you can maintain that attendance or increase attendance, increase your revenues. But at the same time, in the same breath, we do have to concern ourselves with that safety and security environment that really needs to be looked at from resources, policies, procedures, and then we got into the training aspect. Training is going to be the big key right here to success. Whole new generation of workers, not experienced. I think Vince mentioned 100 times, we have a whole new team to work with. And they're coming from different generations, requiring different types of training. And now we do a lot of virtual training. What does that really mean then? How do we measure the learnings from that? And then finally, really standards we talked about and being smarter way we do things. So I really want to thank the audience first. The number of questions came in were phenomenal. I appreciate that. And, what we've got into is a short period of time, like Mark said, but we want to carry all this high energy into the conference in March in Las Vegas, when we look at innovative changes driving the fan experience for our industry. So we have a lot of work to do. We have a lot of content. We have a lot of sharing to do, sharing information. We get to those best practices. So come March at Caesar's Palace, we'd like to continue the same energy, but maybe be hopefully in a live environment so we really can get down and share information. Again, the people that we want, and I think if I remember Jim was saying that, is we can't live in a vacuum any longer. When we look at the environment to have that fan experience and have a good, safe environment, the time has come really to get out of the silos and look at our entire environment of the event. And all the people that we have up here on the screen should be part of this team so that the right hand knows what the left hand's doing, and whether they're from food service or digital media or marketing, working with us in safety and security so that we can really have that truly good fan experience and good, safe environment. So I think, hope that you all can think in terms of spending some time with us in Las Vegas, and certainly reaching out to the executives that, like ourselves here on the call, and reaching out to the insurance folks and hospitality firms and lawyers, et cetera, to join us. So we're gonna have a good experience in March in Las Vegas. But before we go, again, all of us that work to put this on, to have a large crowd like this from all over the world, thank you so much, and for your input. The sponsor, Aaron, thank you so much for helping us. Panelists, your preparation, your insight were very, very helpful. And finally, not finally, but to Chris Canan for producing the show, and thank you, Chris, so much. And again, a big hand, if we can do that, for Mark for putting on a great town hall for us. And thank you so much, Mark, and thank all of you. Okay. Well, I think that's it, Mark. It's a great day for our industry to help us get to the next step.
Wonderful. Have a great day, everybody. Thanks for being here. We enjoyed it.
Okay. Bye-bye.
You all.
Bye-bye.